Hello everyone and welcome to day 2 of Refugee Awareness Week. Yesterday we had a very successful film showing of Incendie. I think everyone would agree, those who turned up, that it was a very kind of thought-provoking and an interesting film to start really our Refugee Week. So today we're going to expand on this theme of refugees, and we're going to discuss a case study which we've chosen of Somalia. And Pete shall be giving a presentation, and then we shall hopefully get into a debate, and we'd love to hear all your opinions. So, well, I'll do it to Pete.
Yeah, welcome everybody. Good to see you all here. Yeah, as Gabby says, the discussion today is on Somalia. I hope some of you have done a bit of reading, but if you haven't, that's okay. I'm going to be giving a bit of background information and what's happening currently, some statistics, and current news issues surrounding Somalia. The picture on there is of a refugee camp that is based in Kenya. That houses thousands of Somali refugees and is growing every day. We'll be discussing that a little bit later. Firstly, I'll give you a bit of background. Somalia is one of the more volatile states in Africa. It's suffered heavily from civil war, like a lot of African countries, but Somalia in particular has had a lot of difficulties up until now. It hasn't had a central unifying government since 1991, and even whilst it did, it's questionable whether the government actually had any control over the country itself. There's been a variety of foreign intervention ever since the colonial period, where there was a fight between the Italians and the British for land in Somalia, all the way up until now, where there's still issues about Kenyan and Ethiopian troops going into the country itself. Currently, UN and African Union peacekeepers are ever present. There's a variety of missions that have taken place there. One of the most famous, which wasn't a UN mission, was a US intervention. I don't know if any of you have seen Black Hawk Down. That was basically where the US went into Mogadishu to try and overthrow a warlord, but it proved unsuccessful. Another issue that Somalia has is Islamic extremists, the most recent group being Al-Shabaab, or otherwise known as the youth movement. So they own quite a large majority of the southern part of Somalia at the moment, and are in constant war with the government forces there. More bad news is that Al-Shabaab has recently merged with Al-Qaeda, obviously a global terror network, and that's a major concern for people across the world. Yeah, here's a map of the situation in Somalia from February. As you can see, if you see the kind of green area here, that's where there's many people who call themselves Somalians, but is not technically Somalia, so it's quite a disputed area around there. All of the blue on the map is government forces, so the recognised government of Somalia. The dark green down at the bottom, that is where Somalia is controlled by Al-Shabaab and other Islamic groups. Also, another issue with Somalia is that it is made up of a lot of different regions. So there is Somaliland up there, which is a self-declared republic. It believes it is completely separate from Somalia, though that hasn't been confirmed by the international community as such. Then there's the Puntland, that has tried to also go the same way as Somaliland, but has not quite reached that extent. As you can see, bordering countries include Ethiopia, Kenya, where the main refugee camps are, and Djibouti as well. Yeah, some statistics. Most of these are from the UN, but obviously because of the situation in Somalia, it's hard to kind of grasp exact numbers, but this is just an outline for you guys. 4 million people are currently without food security, so either are in starvation or their food source itself is not secure, i.e. it's not constant, or they struggle to get food at certain times of the year. There are currently 1.46 million internally displaced persons. That could be more. In internally displaced persons are people who are, in every sense, a refugee, but they do not go abroad, as in they do not go to neighbouring countries. So there are people currently moving around Somalia, avoiding conflicts, and currently homeless, basically. Supposedly there's 1,965 refugees in Somalia, but it's most likely greater than that. The United Nations Human Rights Council believes that there are currently 700,000 people who need their assistance, including shelter, aid, medicine in the country. It also estimates that 1/4 of the population of Somalia is either an IDP or is living outside of the country in, say, refugee camps or further afield as illegal migrants or something along those lines. Yeah, as I said before, most camps are based in Kenya and Ethiopia, which are the two major bordering countries of Somalia. Yeah, here's a map for you. It just shows the distribution of refugees. Most are based in Kenya, and obviously the huge camp there, I've forgotten the name of the place it's at. That's the one. Yeah, that caters to thousands of them. Again, Ethiopia, but also within Somalia there's refugee camps, so within Somaliland and the government-controlled areas in the north, there are also refugee camps. They're kind of classed as being refugees in a foreign sense because Somaliland is not part of Somalia. Another confusing aspect of the country. Again, Yemen also experiencing a high number of refugees. Issues that need to be addressed, obviously. Recently, you might remember last year, there was a huge famine that struck not only Somalia, but a lot of the area around there in East Africa. It resulted in an enormous influx of refugees into neighbouring countries. The UN also admits that a problem with the refugees is that it's a large geographical area to serve, so there is no continuous stream of refugees going into one country. So there are people going into Kenya, Ethiopia, Djibouti, and Yemen, and it's quite difficult for organisations to come together and to organise and distribute food and medicine effectively in that sense. Many settlements are congested, and in turn lack sanitation and also often clean supplies of water. Another issue is illegal migration. Often Europe suffers and is quite a contentious issue, particularly in southern Europe. It's often Somalians who are the ones who move from Somalia up through the north to North Africa and often enter Europe through countries such as Libya, which is suffering obviously a weak administration at the moment. That causes issues in Europe as well, and often there's pressure on the UN to do more about that. Another issue is local conflicts. Refugee camps, whilst safe in a sense, are still prone to issues due to local conflicts, clan fighting, tribal issues, and this sometimes involves moving or involves more movement of peoples to other refugee camps, and it can be a nightmare to distribute aid and supplies. Here are some of the issues that have been facing Somalia. Famine affecting mostly the south areas, so refugees often moving out of the south into Kenya. Crisis is quite a vague term, but it basically means instability in a sense, so that's almost the whole of Somalia. Again, an emergency that can mean anything from lack of medicine to fighting to famine, food shortage. Big numbers, worryingly big numbers of people in need of humanitarian assistance, and many at risk of death from a variety of sources. More issues to address. I'm just going to show you a video about the hostility that refugees sometimes face when they go to other countries. As you can see, there were a number of issues highlighted in that report there from Al Jazeera. One in particular stood out was the hostility that there often develops between the locals of Kenya and Ethiopia and the refugees. The statistic quoted there was about 20,000 Kenyans living near the refugee camp feel completely threatened and outnumbered by the 300,000 or so refugees who were present there. The other issue that was highlighted was the fact that whilst Somali refugees qualify for UN food, help and aid, Kenyans who arguably are in an equally impoverished state, they don't receive or are entitled to any of these things. It causes huge tension. Xenophobia is pretty prevalent, along with abuse, particularly against women, which is something the UN has highlighted. Exploitation of refugees. A lot of refugee camps are on private land, and there's little control over what the landowners can do. That's a real issue. The UN has also highlighted that for this year alone, it feels it would need $48 million to address all of the concerns and cater to the increasing refugee population that's entering into surrounding countries and so on. So, what next? Obviously, there's a lot of questions to answer. One, how should the situation be approached? There's been a variety of suggestions from many sides. Should there be more emphasis on ensuring stability before addressing the refugee problem? Some argue that there's no real point in helping refugees if there's just going to be more coming over the border. Some feel that it's a case of political stability, and that it would be better to focus efforts on making Somalia a proper nation, establishing a centralised government, a strong government, and one that can react and rule over its people in a way that ensures a sense of stability, which is unlike what's currently happening and is often blamed for causing refugees in the first place. The involvement of the international community, should it be more involved? Some say yes, obviously, financially, but both sending in resources. So the AU currently has a ground force in Somalia trying to fix the situation of fix the political situation. There's also arguments that they may be making it worse. Sometimes, recently, for example, the Kenyans blamed Al-Shabaab for coming into their country, and they kidnapped some foreigners from a resort. Kenya retaliated by sending troops into South Somalia. Some say that's unhelpful and uncalled for. They say it just promotes more factions, more fighting, more war, and some feel it should stop. Others feel that it should be left to the African Union. It's not an international problem. They feel that the African Union should stump up the military resources and the cash in order to help the Somali refugees. Will camps in neighbouring countries cause even more tension and lead to more conflicts? As you've seen in the video, there's issues, xenophobia, abuse, exploitation. There's a lot of hostility there with regards to resources. Should camps be moved? Where to? Where should camps go? Refugees obviously can't stay where they are because otherwise it would be refugees. Some say some are hostile to where the camps are. They've got the attitude, it's all right, but not in my backyard. They want them to be moved. So, yes, basically, it's over to you guys. There's a lot of things to discuss. This is